might actually do the same. Maybe except for the platform, I will share my screen for the platform because I'll show it. All around it might be a bit more complicated for you to follow through.
Okay.
But if you want to show the platform as well, I don't mind, from the link in the middle of the slide.
Okay, I'll probably leave that to you actually, Emily.
Yeah, okay. But the first slide, I think you can still show as is because it's just one slide, so it's easy.
Okay. Great. Morning, Nick.
Hi, James. Can you hear me okay?
I can very well. Yes, yes.
Excellent. Excellent.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, very good.
Good. Good, good.
I've been looking at the transport decarbonisation plan. I'm sure it's caught your eye.
Oh, yes. It's big news. It's big news, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in many ways that's going to detract from vehicle automation and the whole sort of work that's going on behind the scenes with level 4 and 5. It just seems like I think the decarbonisation and sort of electric and hydrogen powertrains are going to sort of take over the focus of a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. A lot of the energy of government has gone towards EV rather than AV at the moment, but I think it's still there. It's still a contributor. And when you think about the kind of new business models that might be enabled that help to achieve net zero, then I think the contribution of AV will still be recognized.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting times.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So we've got a couple of minutes before we start. Nick, just I've got a single slide just to sort of hand over to you, sort of halfway through. So I'll give you control and let you do your thing.
Sure. Yeah. There's a few people before me, isn't there? Is that right?
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah, don't panic. No, it's just when it comes around to your session.
Okay.
I'll just give you the control.
Yeah. Shall I just test? Do you want me to try screen sharing, or should we just go with it?
No, I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
I think.
Good morning.
Morning, Hannah.
Hello, Hannah.
Hi. You can't see me either, can you?
We cannot see you now.
It's weird. I've got my camera on, but it's just a black screen. I'll try and figure that out.
Okay. While you do that, I'll start the webinar. Well, morning, everyone. We've got a few more people, I think, that are going to hop on, so I'm just going to pause for a little bit longer, just leave it for a minute or so, just to allow people to access the link. All right. Okay, so I think we'll begin. Welcome to this workshop for the project Steer to Career. This is a project that it's in its latter stages now. We're actually coming towards the end of the project, but we still have things that we want to find out, particularly from stakeholders. We still want to refine some of the results as well. So the purpose today is really to present what we've done so far within the project over the last almost 3 years, but also get some of your ideas and get some feedback from you about where we should be going in terms of the final stages of development. So just a brief rundown of the agenda, which you've already seen, I guess, but I will spend about 15 minutes just presenting the project to you in case you're not familiar with it. And I'll pick out some of the highlights and some of the objectives of what we're trying to achieve. Demetrius will then move on to talk about the driver curriculum, which is a key part of the project and forms the first phase of the project, actually, which is IO1. And then after Demetrius, we've got Željko Jeftik from Ertico, and Željko is going to talk about CAD projects, and particularly around what Ertico have been doing for the past maybe 2 or 3 years. So after Željko, Hannah's going to talk to you about the learning programs. We have 2 learning programs within the project, one for truck and one for bus. And then after Hannah, we've got Professor Nick Reed, and Nick Reed's going to talk about some of the ethics in automation and some of the issues that are going to be faced actually with level 4 and 5. After Nick, we've got Emily from AFT. She's going to be talking to you about the driver pathway. So the career pathway is a key part of the project and really maps out the process towards automation from where we currently are. And then we'll have a bit of an open discussion with some questions that we really need to resolve, and some of the issues that are going to be faced with in the near future. But for now, I will move on to a little bit of housekeeping. I think we're all quite familiar with this now, but I will tell you about it all the same. So in terms of timings, we're scheduled for 2 hours today. There are no breaks. We're just going to work on through. But in terms of your workspace comfort, just a reminder that if you are standing up, you may want to sit down at some point, but if you're not comfortable for the 2 hours, it can get a little bit wearing, so make sure you're nice and comfortable. If you want to ask any questions during the session, then feel free to do so. You can actually do that in the chat box, which you should be able to see on your screen if you scroll down to the top or the left, top or the bottom rather. On my screen it's at the top, but I know sometimes it's at the bottom. And if there's any technical issues, you can actually raise your hand. There's a little sort of raise hand button, so please do so. It is just me actually working everything today, so if I don't get to you immediately, I will actually pick it up when some of the other speakers are talking. And of course, after this, we very much welcome your feedback as to what you thought, not just of this workshop, but actually of the project as a whole. So we began. Where do we begin? Well, we began with several questions, and I'd like to share these with you. So the first question that we wanted to cover as part of the project is, how will autonomous vehicles affect a professional driver? And when we say affect a professional driver, for us, the focus is really on the labour market. So what are we going to do now? And I'll talk about the driver shortage in a second, but what is going to be the issues that a professional driver is going to face, both in terms of their career and in terms of interacting with the technology. We also need to look at the skills and competencies, which is essentially a natural progression. In terms of autonomous vehicles, are they going to need to have a different set of skills and competencies and actually qualifications? How can autonomous vehicles help in terms of commercial road transport? What are the ideas about not just the labour market, but actually about the effectiveness of moving something from A to B? What learning objectives do we as a project team need to focus on? That was quite a key one, particularly because this is all about education. And where will autonomous vehicles be used? I mean, we often say that they're being tested on the public highway, but actually, is it going to start with hubs? Is it going to be started maybe in distribution centres, or will it be in towns and cities with autonomous buses? I don't think anyone knows at the moment, but it's a question we ask all the same. What personal skills will drivers need? Very often with these projects, we always talk about skills, knowledge and competence, but rarely do we talk about personal skills. And it seems to be that actually that will become more of an important factor in the labour market generally. So for us, we wanted to identify what personal skills a driver would need to develop. And a big question is, can professional drivers make a transition? You know, will they actually be able to move from being a manual driver to an autonomous operator? Will they have those skills and experience and personal qualities, or will they actually leave the industry? And if they do, what effect will that have on the industry? When will fully autonomous vehicles be allowed on public roads? I think there's a lot of legislation, there's a lot of infrastructure, and we have to think about cross-border traffic. And of course, the big question is, what will drivers do next? And that's really wrapping up all of those questions. For us, it's all about what the driver is going to do. So I mentioned about the driver shortage. It's certainly not just a UK problem. It's not just a European problem. The truck industry is suffering globally in terms of driver shortages. There is a huge push, as probably you know, in terms of recruitment, but also in terms of recruiting drivers from outside of your native countries. And this is a case of just sort of shifting around labour. It doesn't tackle the big issue. And I don't really want to talk about this because we're talking about vehicle autonomy, but I wanted to highlight it because the issue is that the driver shortage is big now, but actually vehicle autonomy will in part address the problem. Not completely, but it will have a direct effect on the current situation. And actually it's important to consider where we fit in terms of development of level 4 and 5, and whether actually the current crisis accelerates the development of autonomous vehicles. So just a graphic to show you really where we are in terms of level 0 to 5. Everyone thinks there's actually 5, but there's 6 levels of automation. This is currently where we are, and the dates for level 4 and 5 have been revised by the project team, partly because, and you may be aware of this, that a lot of the vehicle manufacturers are now focusing their efforts on powertrains, and they're very much focusing on decarbonisation. So autonomy has taken a slight back step. So to reflect that, we've sort of forecast that level 4 is going to be introduced on public roads in 2030, with level 5 full automation in 2035. These, of course, are just estimates. Nobody really knows at this stage, and there's a lot to be done beforehand. But what this demonstrates is that we're not talking about 30, 40 years time. We're talking about a very short scale of time. And the point about this is actually preparing the labour market, preparing drivers now with the right skills and integrating some of those learning outcomes within current training. And in so doing that, we will partly address some of the learning objectives of the future. Now, I just wanted to show you a quick clip which demonstrates that testing is ongoing. So in spite of what I said about decarbonisation and vehicle manufacturers moving their focus, there are some that are still investigating and investing in vehicle autonomy. So I'll just play this 3-minute clip just for information.
I Hub-to-Hub-projektet är målet att vi tillsammans med Transportlab och vår partner TuSimple ska köra nyttolast i Transportlabs tjänst på motorvägar i Sverige. Vi planerar att köra mellan Södertälje och Jönköping, och den delen planerar vi att utvärdera till sommaren. Vi tittar även på att köra i andra länder, i Kina och nere i Europa då. Men det kommer att komma lite senare. Hub-to-Hub, det innebär att vi kör mellan 2 olika logistikcentraler. Och fokusen då är att till största del så är det motorväg. Det är en kort vägsträcka upp till motorvägen, och sen är det motorvägskörning, och sen så är det då en kort sträcka ner till nästa hubb då. Att utveckla autonomi är utmanande oavsett område. Men det som är lite speciellt för allmänna vägar, det är att vi kortsiktigt inte har några möjligheter att påverka infrastrukturen. Och att vi också kör tillsammans med mänskliga förare, cyklister, fotgängare. Och för motorväg så är det också den högre hastigheten och hastighetsskillnaden mot övriga bilar.
Min uppgift som säkerhetschaufför, det är att man hela tiden sitter med händerna i närheten av ratten, och sen har man ständig kommunikation med testingenjören som sitter bredvid och tittar på att hela systemet fungerar. Så att vi talar om, ja nu ser jag kommer en lastbil i backspegeln eller en personbil omkörning, eller ja nu kommer en från sidan, vad som helst. Så att man ser att autonoma systemet har hela tiden koll med verkligheten.
Att ha möjligheten att jobba tillsammans med en partner som TuSimple, som har erfarenhet från körning på amerikanska motorvägar och även i Kina, flera års erfarenhet, i kombination med Scanias erfarenhet av fordon och autonomi, så har vi möjligheten att flytta fram våra positioner och vara en av de tillverkarna som kommer först till marknaden.
Yes, it's the first time for TuSimple to run self-driving tests in Europe. We feel very excited that we can do it. Now we have just started. We'll keep improving our system and extend the road. Yeah, we're using the data to train our algorithm to get a better performance. Also, we'll analyze all the problems we meet during the road test, trying to find the root cause and come up with a solution.
Det viktigaste för oss att verifiera är att vi kan framföra bilarna på ett säkert sätt och att de kan köra själv och att de uppför sig som andra bilar på vägarna. Och om vi kan visa det, då kommer vi även att kunna fortsätta utvecklingen på motorvägarna med längre körsträckor.
Okay, so really what that demonstrates is that the testing is ongoing. But what was interesting to me within that video was that you have a driver who is almost holding the steering wheel, but not quite. And you also have an engineer on board who's checking that the system is working. So they need a backup system. And I think what that demonstrates, or what I got from that, is that when autonomy is introduced, there is every chance that drivers will be required to sit behind a wheel, but not actually hold the wheel. And I think it seems to me that there will be phased introduction of autonomy. and the driver's role will become more of an evolution. So they will actually stop holding the steering wheel. They'll perhaps take on the engineer's responsibility there to make sure the system is working effectively. And then eventually it'll be hands-free and doing something else. But I think this is the point, is that it has to be a gradual process. So it's quite interesting to see what Scania is doing there. Okay, so of course, we talk about full autonomy, but there is actually a consideration for the fact that a lot of drivers will be driving manually, but also driving or working in an autonomous vehicle. There'll be a long period of combined driving, if you like. And we have things to consider. So, for example, the fleet life cycle of level 5 trucks and buses, they'll be more expensive to buy initially. And actually, are we going to see vehicles bought, or is there going to be more of a leasing model by transport operators? Mixed driving, companies likely to have some manual trucks and buses, as well as the autonomous ones. So again, how is that going to affect the driver in terms of their skills and their ability to switch between one vehicle and another? Of course, we're going to have mixed traffic. So level 5 trucks and buses will need to operate around vehicles that are driven manually. And actually, what's going to be the impact on other people when they see an autonomous vehicle? How are they going to respond? What about the different regulations and infrastructure? It's very difficult, I think you'll agree, to sometimes get widespread agreement on a level playing field, a regulation. How is that going to be affected with vehicle autonomy? What considerations will the authorities and the policymakers need to make? And what about the different environments? So again, it will need to be a managed process. There will need to be a level of infrastructure built in. These are all huge considerations. And my point with this is that the technology is here. The potential for it to be used on public roads is already here, and actually could be introduced within the next 10 or 15 years. But the potential delay for vehicle autonomy will be some of these factors. And actually that could cause a backlog of maybe 20 or 30 years. But that's enough from me for now. I'm going to hand you over to Dimitris, who is one of the project partners, and Dimitris is going to talk to you about what we did in terms of developing the driver curriculum for the future. So over to you, Dimitris. I can operate it if you want me to.
Okay, thank you, James. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Dimitris Zanis, and I'm a research associate at Hellenic Institute of Transport of Center for Research and Technology, Hellas. Together, we will have a look at the summary of the intellectual output number 1 of the Steer to Career DRV project. The outline of this presentation forms as follows. We will start with introduction to the objectives of IO1 with the initial approach and the current license systems in different EU countries. Then we will continue with the identification of the problem and the needs in the context of IO1. After that, we will discuss about the professional drivers' profiles and the current performed tasks, which form the core profile of the professional drivers, and we will end up with the results of the survey among professional drivers and stakeholders, as well as with the intended outcomes of the IO1. So let's start. The main objective of the IO1 was the development of a joint European curriculum for horizontal career progression of professional drivers beyond the primary task of driving. The main purpose of the IO1 was the identification of the tasks that professional drivers will perform when autonomous vehicles hit the road. The identification led to the curriculum that professional drivers will need to follow in order to develop the appropriate skills. So at the next slide, we can see the diagram of the initial approach that we had in order to identify both the tasks that professional drivers will perform when autonomous vehicles hit the road and the learning programs that have to be developed in order to meet the new needs. At the left side of the diagram, we collect all the appropriate information of the European Qualifications Framework, the European Credit System for Vocational Education and Training, and other qualifications that exist. And all this led us to form a curriculum, a base curriculum. On the other side of the diagram, we conduct both desk research as well as interviews in order to collect the appropriate data that will form the baseline of the tasks that professional drivers will perform when autonomous vehicles hit the road. Following up, a combination of the current curriculum and the baseline led to a blended learning approach, which in turn led to the learning programs. So here you can see the driving license system that exists in each of the project consortium partner countries. The United Kingdom, in order to take a professional driver license, you have to own a full car license, to be over 18, to get a medical certification, and to get the certificate of professional competency. At France, in order to take a professional driver license, you have to own a full car license, to be over 18, and to pass both theoretical and practical tests. Both at Berlin and Germany, in order to take a professional driver license, you have to own a full car license, to be over 18, to get a medical certification, and to pass both theoretical and practical tests. And finally, at Greece, you have to, in order to take the professional driver license, to own a full car license, to be over 18, to get a medical certification, pass both theoretical and practical tests, and to get a certificate of professional competency. So let's continue to the identification of the problem and the needs. The present curriculum deals with the impact that the introduction of fully autonomous vehicles will have regarding the careers and job opportunities of professional drivers. In the framework of the project, level 5 AVs will be taken into consideration. SAE level 5 AVs express the sustained and unconditional performance by an automated driving system of the entire dynamic driving task, a dynamic driving task fallback without any expectation that the user will respond to a request to intervene. In AVs of such an automation level, all human occupants are considered as passengers of the vehicle and are not involved in the task of driving. The deployment of level 5 AVs is expected to create a new ecosystem for their proper operation to be ensured. The new ecosystem, as it shows in the diagram below, consists of 8 components. The components namely are fleet management, customer experience, infotainment services and apps, smart cities, ride sharing, and insurance, charging stations, vehicle maintenance, and remote operations. So, considering the new ecosystem, Waymo stated that there are 4 jobs which are of significance for the proper operation of its own fleet. These 4 jobs are technicians, dispatchers, fleet response team, and customer services representative. Technicians, they are the people who are responsible for performing vehicle inspection and repairs. Dispatchers are the people who handle the logistics of making sure that there are enough vehicles on the road and in the right places to meet customer needs. Fleet response teams are the backups to guide self-driving cars through tricky situations if it needs. And customer service representatives, they receive calls from passengers if it's needed. So let's continue with the next part of the presentation, which deals both with desk research as well as with the surveys or interviews that we have been conducted. 2 discrete steps have been followed for assessing and further analyzing the needs of professional drivers. The first one consists of the desk research, and it's related with the outputs of ProfDRV projects regarding professional drivers' profiles and performance tasks that have been identified. And the second one is a survey which conducted among professional drivers and stakeholders in the countries of the Street to Career DRV consortium partners to identify the further career opportunities. According to the European project's ProfDRV, a core profile for professional freight drivers have been developed. The profile is based on a questionnaire survey involving approximately 140 drivers, trainers, employees, and further transport stakeholders from European countries. The analysis of the collected profiles was divided into 3 different attributes that professional drivers need to have according to the European Qualifications Framework, and these are knowledge, skills, and competencies. The selected profiles are based on the core work tasks and cross-cutting tasks. The core work tasks are driving and maneuvering a vehicle, performing pre-departure tasks, loading and unloading of goods, planning driving times and routes, maintenance of vehicle and vehicle combinations, work documentation and paperwork. The cross-cutting tasks are cooperation with customers, cooperation with supervisors, colleagues, controlling bodies, and general public, occupational health and safety, and a healthy lifestyle, continuous vocational education and training. So, despite the significance of the previous gathered information, the identified professional driver's core profile cannot be used in the framework of our project because the set profiles refer to lower levels of AVs, such as level 0 and level 1. In the framework of our project, the further career opportunities of professional drivers examined considering the deployment of SIA level 5 AVs. For that reason, we conducted a survey among professional drivers and logistics-related stakeholders. The two surveys conducted in order for the curriculum development team to identify the tasks that professional drivers perform mostly and with higher frequency. Moreover, through the surveys, professional drivers and stakeholders were asked to state their opinion regarding autonomous vehicles and their implementation in the logistics sector, as well as on how the introduction of autonomous vehicles in the logistics sector will affect the unemployment rates of the professional drivers. So now let's continue with the outline of each questionnaire. Professional drivers questionnaire consists of 19 questions and it is divided into 3 parts. The first part deals with the demographic characteristics of the respondents. The second one with the current activities professional drivers perform in parallel with the primary task of driving. And the last one with autonomous vehicles and their impact on professional drivers. Moving on, the stakeholders questionnaire consisted of 16 questions and was divided into 4 parts. The first deals with demographic characteristics of the respondents, the second one with the autonomous vehicles, the third with the training that professional drivers are provided in order to perform activities in parallel with the primary task of driving, and the last one with the implementation of autonomous vehicles in the logistics sector. So let's talk about the results of the survey among professional drivers. The results from the survey show that the professional drivers nowadays perform frequently daily or 2 to 3 times a week 6 activities in parallel with the primary task of driving. These activities are documentation of daily work and record keeping, documentation for vehicle operating times, vehicle cleaning and care, departure checks, vehicle inspection, and route planning and monitoring. In addition, professional drivers believe that in the future, the activities will be partially performed by them. Several insights on the knowledge of professional drivers regarding autonomous driving and autonomous vehicle can be derived from the response to the questionnaire. The hottest insight amongst them is the low awareness of the differences between the autonomy level 5 vehicles and fully autonomous vehicles. So let's continue with the results of the survey among stakeholders. The results indicate that professional drivers from stakeholders' point of view nowadays perform mainly 6 activities in parallel with the primary task of driving. These activities are manage customers, load and unload of goods, secure cargo, maintenance, departure checks, and refueling. Moreover, stakeholders believe that trucks and specifically long-haul routes will be the first to be introduced with autonomous vehicles. Also, several insights on the knowledge of stakeholders regarding autonomous driving and autonomous vehicle can be derived from the responses to the questionnaire. The key amongst them is the unobserved of low awareness level between different levels of automation of autonomous driving and the autonomy level 5 vehicles. The results derived from both drivers and stakeholders questionnaire led to create 4 generic categories. These 4 categories of tasks seems to be the most promising to be performed after the deployment of autonomous vehicles in the logistics sector for professional drivers. The 4 categories are maintenance, safety and security of autonomous vehicles, managing connected digital tools and records, customer service, and fleet and hub management. So at this table, we can see the general 4 categories and the specific tasks that belong to each of the general category. For the general category maintenance, safety and security of autonomous vehicles, the specific tasks are vehicle inspection, maintenance, vehicle cleaning and care, refueling, secure cargo, and finally load and unload of goods. For the general category managing connected digital tools and records, the specific tasks are documentation of daily work and record keeping and documentation for vehicle operating times. For general category customer service, the specific task is manage customers. And finally, for the fleet and hub management general category, the specific tasks are departure checks and route planning and monitoring. So that's the approach and the results that have been that we have from both the desk research and the collected surveys.
Okay, thank you, Dimitris. I think what it identifies, or what it reveals rather, is that actually some of the tasks that drivers currently do, they will still be doing with autonomous vehicles. But there will be new tasks, and they'll need to be equipped with the right skills, knowledge, and competencies through a curriculum, to enable them to do those tasks. So thank you very much. We're now going to move to Željko from Ertico. And Željko is, I think, going to take control of the presentation and give you a bit of a rundown on what Ertico has been doing in terms of connected autonomous vehicles. So
yes.
Over to you, Željko.
Thank you very much, James, and a pleasure to be with you. I was about to say sunny morning, but it's not very sunny in Brussels today. So let me please go through a couple of slides just to tell you a little bit about what Ertico has been doing and is doing, and a little bit also more perspective on how I see the market. Now, my background before I joined Ertico the first time is that I was developing active safety systems early in my career, so more collision avoidance systems, etc., lane keeping support systems that are basically used as a starting point for full vehicle automation, so to say. Since then, I've also been working very much at the International Road Transport Union with tracking companies worldwide, working on digitalization of freight documents, working on advocacy, business implementations, etc., but always also very close to automation and trying to understand how does this fit actually in the real life. So I will give you a little bit insights of what I've been doing and also what we do at Ertico. So first, we of course always start with a little bit promotion of the Ertico partnership. It is only one or two slides. We are basically a public-private partnership where we have both cities, other road authorities, vehicle manufacturers, traffic management systems, researchers, and many others in our membership coming together to work on intelligent mobility, basically. And as you can see here on the left side, public authorities are the biggest stakeholder group in our membership, but we also have considerable amount of all of the other colleagues. Now, if you look at the activities that we are doing in 2021 when it comes to vehicle automation, and in this case, just taking the truck automation as an example, these are all of the ongoing projects or activities that have recently finished that are dealing with this topic. So right now we have, I will not even count them, but you can see the entire list of different automation activities, mainly on truck side, but also we are working to a large extent with shuttles. When it comes also to driver employment and these effects, we have also in the beginning of the year, together with Ecoris and a number of other partners, released a study, a report that is looking into the employment, what is going to happen with the drivers. And of course, like everybody else, we have a couple of different scenarios. In our case, we have 4 specific scenarios, depending on how fast the technology is progressing to see what is going to be the impact on the drivers. If you look beyond what Ertico does, if you look at some of our collaboration partners, we see also that there's a number of companies. I'm just showcasing 6 companies here, but in total, we have contact with approximately some 25 to 30 different companies in the field of vehicle automation. A lot of them are in the US, many of them are also in Europe. And what is also very interesting is, even though we have had these 25, 30 collaboration partners with us, we also see that the interest or investment as well is coming very quickly into these companies, and it's also disappearing very swiftly. So if you just look at these 6 companies that I'm showcasing right now, you can already see that Volvo's, for example, Vera concept, that was launched just a couple of years ago. I believe it was in 2016, end of 2016, beginning of 2017. Fantastic revolutionary concept. It has been put on ice right now because They see that they were able to develop technology to a certain extent. Still, there are some technology issues, but the bigger really point is how do we make this to operate in a useful way in real life operations with DFDS or any other basically shippers. And they've not really managed to do that. When we talk about some of the other companies, especially in the US, we see also that there's a lot of focus on building truck platoons where you could potentially have one truck driver driving two trucks, basically, that are electronically connected. So basically the second truck is the follower. What is driving this in the US are two things, as you mentioned, James. One is the driver shortage. The second one is that the cost of operations. And here in Europe, we are a little bit slower than that. We don't see any real interest from any of the truck OEMs to really come out with these solutions anytime soon, if I can be fully honest. But these things can change swiftly as well. And we have seen in the past few weeks that Germany is now starting to allow self-driving vehicles on their roads. We also see that France came out last week with a similar regulation that from September next year, you will be able to drive autonomously on certain roads. I don't see these as directly the drivers of, let's say, real life change. I think we are going to see much more testing, but not so much real life change. On the other side, one country where I do see a potential, where we are going to see some of the automation of truck drivers' jobs, is actually the UK, because you have a combination in the UK of a country that is quite open to new technologies, and you also have, let's say, government who is willing to try new things. You know, we all know that because of Brexit, there's less and less truck drivers in the UK from Eastern countries, and not only because of Brexit, but you know, we all know the driver shortage points. And we do believe that the regulation there will be easily adapted to, for example, allow drone trucks in platoons, for example, being driven during the night from south to east, or vice versa, as an example. So I personally believe that UK is the market in Europe where we might see the first uptake of any significant operation of self-driving trucks. James also highlighted one aspect, and that is that while the automation hype was at its peak some 3-4 years ago, I also expect that automation is going to take a little bit of backstage to sustainability. And especially you have also heard about the Green Deal. Electrification and hydrogenization of all of the trucks is really what all truck OEMs and car manufacturers also as well are investing in. Therefore, I do expect that all of the resources are going to be really focused on that. I was organizing actually one session at the UCAD conference earlier this spring, where I was discussing how the vehicle automation is going to support the Green Deal, because vehicle automation is mentioned in the Green Deal strategy from the European Commission, but it's absolutely not clear how this automation element is going to contribute to the greening. So this still needs to be seen, but we can expect that the truck automation and overall vehicle automation will slow down and be more manageable with expectations. And I do not believe that ITF or our own studies where we said that technology is going to be rapidly implemented, that those scenarios will kick in. I think we are going to see a gradual but more manageable and slower growth of automation. Therefore, I also don't believe there's not going to be a single truck driver or a bus driver or taxi driver that is going to lose their job to automation. Now, what is interesting out of all of these companies is that they're not only looking at the truck automation. I mean, most of them are looking at the technologies. But one company that is really unique this far, in my view, is actually Einride. They are building these self-driving trucks. You don't even have a driver cabin there. Everything is remotely operated, either by automation or by the remote truck driver. But they are basically offering transport services to end customers, to shippers. So they are working right now with Oatly, with Coca-Cola, etc., and are offering transport services. Why they're doing this? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, one is the driver shortage. The other one is that you want to slash the transport costs. But there's also another reason that they don't talk so much about. But after having worked for 6 years with the transport operators, there's also this element that transport operators, as we have them today, are super traditional. And I think vast majority of the transport industry are very much traditionalists. So they are not going to be willing to change unless they really, really have to. Usually if they are mandated or regulated, but they're not going to change just because, even if they see that on paper, they might have even better business case, that the change, if you develop, if you are depending on the current business models, is going to take very, very long time. So this is one of the truck drivers from Einride that you can see here. They, by the way, are also manufacturing simply electric trucks. And right now they are having a lot of customers going for electric trucks and are still themselves also trying to work out the model in which routes, under what conditions can we operate the self-driving trucks. So they are working on it, but they have not found yet the golden age. And we're also talking about a little bit about what are requirements for the future truck drivers. Well, we don't have to look very far, because if you go to Einride website, you can actually apply for an open position to be a remote truck driver at their company. So this is an open position. Anybody who fulfills these requirements and is interested in driving wherever in Europe you are, that is a great opportunity. Now, if you look at passenger transport, we also know that the mobility of young people, but mobility of everybody, is basically changing mobility needs. I don't believe that we are going to go away as swiftly as we need to and hope to away from the private car ownership, but there's a gradual change of the perception of the young people and how they're thinking. So, of course, when you're talking about public transport or collective passenger transport automation, we are often looking at these shuttles, which, in my opinion, I usually call them shopping carts because they are pretty slow and they're very limited in their operational range. So it is going to be very interesting to see how swiftly people will uptake these vehicles. When speaking with some of these manufacturers behind the screen, so to say, it is pretty clear that none of them has also found a sustainable business model yet. Most of these pilots are driven by the innovation funds or simply by the cities who want to be seen as innovative, and they would like to put them into place to try them out and see how it works. We have also seen that some of the most promising companies, such as BestMile, who was offering kind of remote control of multiple vehicles, are going to bankruptcy. The Swiss company, they announced it just 1 month ago. So I think there's going to be a consolidation of the need. But one thing that is absolutely certain is that when it comes to vehicle automation, and this is also one thing that we see from the European Commission, for passenger transport, nobody except the car manufacturers want to have more, let's say, passenger car vehicle, privately owned vehicles that are self-automated. The focus is much more on the collective passenger transport and automation there. So I believe that passenger transport with these shuttles is going to continue to be taken up in certain areas, for example, at the airports, certain routes in cities, but it is still going to take some time before we can prove the benefits so that enough people can actually go away from their private car and start using these vehicles. Now, for passenger transport as well, what is also important is that we are going away from looking into driver-centric point of view into the traveler-centric point of view. And this is a small change on the paper, but huge change in the perceptions and everything. And looking, for example, at the jobs of of professional bus drivers. There as well, we foresee that this is not going to be something that that is going to be disappearing totally, because one of the elements, and I loved very much presentation from the colleague from CERT, stating that basically the drivers are also representatives of the company, if it's a truck company towards the shippers, or if it's a bus company towards the passengers. People aspects are going to be very important still in the future as well. Yes, there might be less driving task by the drivers, but the person on board is going to be very important in the future as well. And also speaking with my wife the other day, we were discussing also these self-driving shuttles, and if we could offer more self-driving shuttle operations, for example, in the evenings, when we cannot afford to have a big buses driving around or taxis driving around, this could reduce cost. But also from a security point of view, this is, you know, as a female, my wife was saying, I would be hesitant to jump into a smaller vehicle where there might be some other passengers who I don't know, and there's nobody who could intervene in case there would be any security threats, so to say. So the situation is really complex from the city point of view. Now, what we're also doing is that, as I'm mentioning right now, there's a lot of different unknowns considering passenger transport and automation. And this is one part of the reasons why we from ERTCO have launched a global study where we are interviewing 300 cities in different parts of the world on topics of sustainability, especially air quality and climate change. We are interviewing them on data sharing and mobility as a service. We also have some questions around how the cities and decision makers in cities are seeing the vehicle automation, how they're seeing the vehicle electrification, because those are the decision makers really that are making decisions if they want to implement these solutions in their cities. The blue dots are the cities that have already been interviewed. We have just passed 150 interviews, and we have 150 interviews still to go. And we actually reconsidering the questions if you should, for example, include instead of data sharing for the coming 150 cities, we are considering, do we include electromobility or urban deliveries or vehicle automation to interview the cities. So there as well, if you have some specific questions, we are very much open to consider them for our 150 coming interviews. But it is clear we need to listen to the city's needs when it comes to urban mobility of people, because they are the one in the driving seat right now, well, and for the future to come. So to summarize this let's say, diverse field of the topics that I was discussing, from truck automation to automation with the shuttles and the activities that we are doing, is that vehicle automation is absolutely coming, but it's also coming gradually. We have all realized that technology is not there yet for any conditions, so to say, but technology is already ready for specific types of conditions where we can pre-program operations with high volumes, etc. This is, I think, also leading to more realistic expectations, because speaking with all of these companies, speaking with Einride, Navya, EasyMile, Embark, any of them, all of them are saying that one of their biggest challenges is to manage expectations. Because if a city or a public transport operator would like to procure a self-driving shuttle, they expect, okay, I'm going to type in address from the origin and address of destination, and the shuttle is going to do that automatically. Basically, that we are not there yet. Basically, so managing expectations is the key for all of these companies. Sustainability is the key, is another key to success, because we have to prove that if we have higher levels of automation with or without driver, this leads to environmental benefits. We do not have enough data on that yet, because a lot of this work has been focusing very much on safety, on lowered costs. Lowered costs are, of course, always important, but sustainability is also going to be a key driver. Truck automation, especially, I would say, is more mature than shuttle operations and is launching in restricted areas. The benefit of truck automation is that we already have had a number of vehicles operating in ports. For example, Port of Rotterdam has already for a number of years self-driving container pods, if you can call them like that. While passenger automation is facing a bit more challenges, and I think the biggest challenge is really from the perception of the users. When are we ready to go away from just nice tryout of new technology versus this is a solution for us in a daily operations? Two last points. Professional driver jobs are absolutely not threatened. I think we are all understanding that much better now because technology is progressing, but at a slower pace than expected. And this is also an opportunity to attract the new generation. When I was showing to my kids the video of the truck driver job at Einride, they were asking me, "Dad, you should be doing this job instead of being in the Zoom meetings and writing reports all of the time. This is so much more fun." So I think that there's a huge opportunity also to attract new generation. Talking about all of the other driver tasks, they also need to be taken into account, which you are already doing very well. So we look forward very much to continue this discussion. Again, I have not summarized enough all of the work that we are doing in all of these activities. Each of these activities has either focus on technologies or jobs or driver profiles, etc., etc. And we look forward to engaging with you, learning from you as well, on how we can push this field further. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope this was approximately what you were hoping to get from this presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, very interesting. Yeah, I was particularly interested with the Einride job to be a remote driver. It's interesting because as a kid, I was playing with remote control trucks, and now there's an opportunity to do it again as a grown-up.
Absolutely, and they were actually just this week. They were at Goodwin Festival in the UK of the Future Mobility Solutions, and they were allowing people and children and everybody else to drive these self-driving pods remotely from UK with the vehicles in Sweden that are, of course, on a test track in a controlled environment. But at least you were able to, regardless if you're a 5-year-old kid or if you're father and just a technology geek like I am, to remotely control them. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, great. And also, is it possible to get the information on your projects just from the Ertico website?
Absolutely. I can also, in this presentation, I can add the different web links so that you can also have a look into different projects. I'm pretty sure you have seen this report from Ertico and Acoris on driver jobs and implications with automation. So that's one of our latest outcomes. But yes, I can send you all of the links. And again, let's discuss what we can do together as well.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, very interesting.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move back to the project team. And the next member of the team is Hannah from DEKRA. Hannah's going to be talking to you about our training programs. We have two pilot training programs, one for truck and one for bus. And Hannah is going to explain where we are with things. So Hannah, do you want, shall I do the presentation?
I think I can share it. I was kind of expecting you to share it, but I've got it open here, so no problem. Hang on one second.
I can go back to it.
Never mind, I'm already there. 1 second. Oh, you were faster. All right. Okay, I'll use the opportunity to say hi to everybody. My name is Hannah Ennen, and I work for DEKRA SE. We're a technical monitoring organization, actually working internationally, but the headquarters are based in Germany, where I'm also based in Frankfurt here. I work for the training and development department, and we were involved in the project as project partners responsible for the Intellectual Output 2 learning programs as announced by James. James, if you go to the next slide, I would just like to give you an outline of what I would like to present to you today regarding the learning programs that we developed in the context of the project. So first of all, I'll look at the aims that we had for the IO and what profiles we actually used, which I think ties in quite well with what Jellicoe just said or summarized, that people remain important and remain in the vehicle. So that's exactly what we were looking at in the context of this intellectual output. I'll talk a bit about the objectives we had for these learning programs and the content. And then we'll take a closer look at the foundation curricula, which are, I guess, pretty much the backbone of these learning programs, outlining all the learning outcomes that our profiles will need in the future. And then we'll talk a bit about our initial results from the stakeholder consultation, which is still ongoing. And afterwards, maybe we'll have some time for questions and answers, or we can do that at the end of the workshop. I don't know, James, what you would prefer, but let's just see how far we get.
Yeah.
So the aim of the intellectual output was to develop 2 learning programs that would prepare drivers, which in the future won't be doing much more driving, so maybe we should not call them drivers, but we keep doing that, operators, for their new roles and responsibilities that they will assume in level 5 automation. The programs are targeted at training developers or training providers in order to highlight to them what are the anticipated learning outcomes at that level of automation so that they can prepare for their own training programs. They're based on what we anticipate to be the qualification requirements for these profiles at level 5 automation, a lot of which Dimitris has already presented to you, which was done in the context of intellectual output 2, but a lot of which was already established in previous projects, most notably the Future Drive project, where we developed learning outcome profiles for drivers on fully autonomous vehicles. So we established which profiles to take into focus, and in line with what Jellicoe just said about people remaining important and remaining in the vehicle, we wanted to look at drivers remaining in the vehicle and the tasks and how they would change for them in the future. So firstly, we looked at drivers or service staff in fully automated public buses, so public transport, that's passenger transport. And the second profile was the drivers in fully automated trucks, so freight transport. Yes, so we had 6 objectives for our programs. The first one was to highlight the skills, attitudes, and attributes needed for the new roles on board autonomous vehicles. So there is a shift of main focus of the job role away from driving, and in the case of the truck profile, towards safety and security issues mostly, and in case of the bus drivers, towards a customer service orientation in their role. So it was important to look at those more personal, social and communicative competencies as well. And the second objective was to assess different training methodologies, which could be relevant to the learning outcomes we've identified. So as you all know, training methods, different training methods are useful for different target groups and also different learning contents. So we also wanted to look at what training developers and training providers might consider here when developing their training programs. The third objective was to outline the content needed to inform training developers. So the general idea is to outline what we think will become relevant, but not to prescribe a ready-made training course, basically. And that ties into the to the fourth objective. So to create a sample curriculum for practical implementation that training providers can then use as a template for the development of future training courses for these roles. The fifth objective was to that we also wanted to ensure that our learning programs would provide HR managers with a tool to facilitate skills assessment in the recruitment process. So basically, by highlighting which learning outcomes or competencies will become relevant, we can give them hints as to what to look for in the recruitment process. And then lastly, we wanted to identify skills and competencies that we could embed into existing VET frameworks, such as the EQF, but also other vocational qualifications and frameworks. So in order to achieve that, we developed a learning outcome oriented approach. Yeah. So as to the contents of the programs, here you see the example of the structure of the BUS learning program, which comprises an introduction in which we talk about the purpose and the objectives of this learning program, what I just explained to you. And then we have the learning outcomes profile for the respective role, which is what is anticipated to be the tasks and corresponding competence requirements for these roles. In the third chapter, and that ties into what I said about the training methods, we have basically compiled an overview of what training methods and approaches we think will become more and more relevant in the future and will also be relevant to our target group, that of drivers. And then lastly, we have established two so-called foundation curriculums. We call them foundation curriculum because they're supposed to be a basis, not a prescribed training concept, which are subdivided into units. I'll look at the units with you in a second. And where we have for each unit, we have outlined what are the learning outcomes to be achieved, what are the corresponding contents to be covered in those units, and what we consider appropriate or suitable methods and also learning environments for these units, but they're considered to be more recommendations rather than, a complete course. So on the next slide, you can see firstly the foundation curriculum for the bus workers. That consists of 7 units that we have identified to be relevant. The first one being passenger safety and safe transport of baggage. Then the second one is handling of passenger rights. The third one is understanding and reacting to alerts of the vehicle and automation process. So these are more technical issues here. Then maintaining a safe environment and mitigating the risk of vandalism. That's also something that Jeliko's wife was referring to. You need that security and safety aspect there. Then emergency vehicle control and overriding the system, which is the second more technically focused unit. And then in the 6th unit, we look at managing automated payments and possibilities for fraud and how to handle those. Then in the 7th unit, we're looking at managing potential and actual conflicts between and with passengers. So that ties in a bit with the 4th unit. And then lastly, we have maybe we can call that an additional unit, because that is more focused on coach drivers, so long distance routes, because they have a different need for customer service contents. So these are the 8 units we've identified to be relevant for the bus workers. And then for the, it says here bus worker, it should say truck worker. For the truck worker, we have a bit less. Some are overlapping. The first one is understanding and reacting to the alerts of the vehicle and automation process. So just like with the drivers, we have this technical focus. They need to be able to handle all these automated systems and processes. And similarly, the second one is about emergency vehicle control and overriding the system. Then the third one is when it gets to the more safety and security related issues, the behavior after and during accidents and emergency situations on the road, because they would be the first person often to be there and present in these situations. The fourth unit is maintaining hazard awareness as a precaution. And the fifth unit is to be a first responder in case of road traffic accidents. So these are the units we've identified to be relevant for these troop profiles, and then maybe we can take a bit of a look at what do these foundation curricula actually look like. So there is something missing now. Sorry about that. Can you just click again, James? Again. Okay. So
And here?
yeah, there you go. That's what I was looking for. That should have been the first one. So here's an example from the bus curriculum. Unit 7, managing potential and actual conflict between and with passengers. So as you can see, we have a short description of the unit initially that just outlines what it's all about and what should be the focus of the training unit. And then we define what is the target group or who is the target group. In this case, it's all workers on passenger vehicles, but there are some units that are more relevant to, say, for example, long distance bus drivers. I wanted to take a closer look at the learning outcomes in the next step with you, but I think then we would have to go back. So maybe we can just keep it as it is. So in the learning outcomes section, it's quite small now. It's not very
I can go back.
age friendly.
Let me go back. This one?
There you go. Perfect. Here you can see, just as an example, where we've really specified quite clearly what the worker should be able to do upon completion of the unit. So in this case, it's the worker can describe the major reasons for complaints and know how to react to them, can identify possible signs of conflict, knows how to contact, who to contact in cases of emergencies, understands how to communicate with passengers. That's obviously a very complex issue, is able to remain calm and control emotions in difficult situations, uses body language and expressions as well as verbal language, and stays aware of the environment around them and is prepared to intervene when a situation occurs. And then we have, if you go maybe, there you go, that's what I want to look at next. We have a section which we called associated competencies now, which is basically focusing on the transversal competence. So more personal, social, communicative competencies that are important for the respective units. And here we have identified quite a few of them. In this case, the worker is able to apply the following transversal competencies in the context of managing conflict. So he or she has an awareness of the sensitive issues and potential dangerous implications of the context. I mean, we only need to think back to the poor bus driver in France that actually lost his life due to these conflicts. And I think this is just a very, very, difficult issue for drivers and will remain quite relevant. Applies communication and conflict management skills such as active listening, interpersonal skills, problem-solving competence, and to prevent and de-escalate potentially difficult situations. Applies confidence and assertiveness as well as leadership and management skills to manage potentially difficult situations, and utilizes understanding of conflict management to know when and how to protect themselves and seek external help. Yeah, in the next step, we then define the contents of the unit. So in this case, you can only see the first three, unfortunately, but for example, the safety standards, managing customer safety as part of customer service orientation, common safety risks are of and around the vehicle. And then lastly, as I explained before, we also have suggested methods and training environments. I also included an image of that, but that's a bit, maybe it'll come up, maybe not.
Is it somewhere here?
Yeah, it's, yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Sorry
there we go.
about that. It's so sometimes these animations, they just do exactly the opposite of what you want them to do. But now we have it here. So here we define basically what are the important aspects of the respective unit and how could they be trained quite well. For example, here dealing with conflict can be simulated in role play, or also in virtual contexts. So it's also a bit about, should there be face-to-face sessions, or could it also be remote learning? Which in this case, we say parts could be done remotely. Micro-learning could be used to an extent, but in this case, for the whole conflict management and solution problem-solving competence, there should be social interaction aspect. So then the learning environment specifies where these units could be trained. And in this case, we decided or thought that a classroom as well as in-vehicle or bus depot would be suitable learning environments for the contents of this unit. So that's an example of what the units look like. And now I think we're going to look at stakeholder consultation. Exactly as I said before, it's currently ongoing. So we haven't really got so much feedback that it's statistically irrelevant yet. But we have a few initial responses, and they have highlighted that generally they think that the programs are based on a good representation of the anticipated tasks and accordingly the qualification requirements for these job roles. They also said mostly that the suggested training methods are suitable, but they saw there was 2 respondents that see also increased trends of more interactive scenario-based and simulated training in the future at level 5 automation, if we're looking at 15 years from now, and that we should include more of those in parts. There was 2 additional tasks and skills requirements that were suggested for the track profile, and that involved loading and unloading and also administrative handling. So while they're driving, if they're not driving anymore, they would be handling more of the whole documentation of the shipment and the processes involved. So we will take a closer look at that when we get more feedback and see if it's something that's relevant to include as new competencies or if it's just more of existing ones. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, shoot. Otherwise, I think we're all looking forward to Nick's ethics in automation speech. I am anyway. So
great. Okay, thank you, Hannah. It was interesting actually. I was thinking that Željko made the point about the risk of taking an autonomous vehicle in the evenings for his wife, and we're talking about actually having a worker in amongst the passengers, helping to make it secure. So it seems like we're on the right lines.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you. So we're going to move on to Professor Nick Reed from Reed Mobility. Nick's going to cover with you some of the ethical questions of connected autonomous vehicles and perhaps what we need to consider in the future. So I'll hand control over to you, Nick.
Okay, thank you. So we need to start this. Oops. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, full screen. Great, great. Okay, move that out of the way. Great, sorry. So firstly, I just want to say thank you to James for inviting me to speak today. And thank you to all the speakers so far. I really enjoyed the presentations. I think it's been excellent content so far. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about some of the work I've been doing on ethics for connected and automated vehicles. I've been working on connected and automated vehicles for more than 10 years, but I'm not an engineer. I come from a psychology background, so I'm thinking more about behaviors and what kind of strategic impacts that automated vehicles might have, and yeah, thinking about some of those ethical issues which have been so kind of attention grabbing in the last few years. So I don't need to talk too much about this. I think everyone's done a great job in kind of giving a perspective on what's the latest. I think the only thing I would add is, the last 18 months, COVID particular, I think there's been a sense that developments in the industry have shifted more towards the movement of goods, and that the automated vehicle industry is focusing on commercial use cases based on the movement of goods in different types of vehicle formats. So we see that the Neuro vehicle, which is kind of a shopping delivery vehicle, the Starship pavement robot in the bottom right there, and then TuSimple, which featured in the previous one of the previous videos, and Waymo, of course, working on automated trucks. So yeah, I think there is a shift towards the movement of goods as a priority over passenger use cases. And I was really pleased that Zelko thought the UK was a leader in the space. I think there has been a lot of activity, particularly in trying to develop a regulatory framework to accommodate the testing, development and deployment of automated vehicles. I think we're going to see a lot of progress on that in the UK in the year to come. So yeah, thank you for that, Zelko. I put up the Gartner hype cycle. I'm sure you've seen it before, that the technology has an innovation trigger and then everyone gets excited about it, then realize all the challenges associated with the deployment of that technology. So we go into a trough of disillusionment, everyone's expectations are lowered. And then gradually, as we resolve those challenges, we come up the slope of enlightenment towards a plateau of productivity. And for a while now, I've been presenting this slide. I think 2015, 2016 was the peak. Then some of the kind of ambitious timelines started to get missed in terms of automated vehicle deployment. We had some tragic crashes, some fatal crashes involving automated vehicles, and that sent us into the trough of disillusionment. But I think the signs are there that 2020, 2021 is us starting to get up that slope of enlightenment. And I was really pleased. Gartner themselves published their hype cycle for connected and automated vehicles this month, and they agreed. They had it essentially the same, that autonomous vehicles are now sitting in that trough of disillusionment, but starting to head up that slope of enlightenment. So yeah, I think it's whilst some of the headlines that have been less positive over the last few years, I think we're on a more positive track now. So yeah, I was going to talk about the work of a expert group that was started by the European Commission to advise on ethical issues related to driverless mobility. So 14 experts from different countries, different backgrounds, engineers, philosophers, lawyers, sociologists, psychologists. And the first thing we did when we got together was realize there was no way we could cover all of the ethical issues associated with automated vehicles in the time available to us. So we did our best. We focused on the things that we felt were most important over the 18 months we had. And it wasn't that we were determining the European Commission's position, but providing advice to the Commission on what we felt were the most important ethical issues related to automated vehicles. And the report was published late last year, and it's very easy to read. It's very easily accessible through the link there. You could find it very easily. And we came up with 20 different recommendations. They were clustered in 3 different groups. So we had safety, transparency, and responsibility, and 6 or 7 in each of those. I was in the safety group, so I'm going to talk through some of the key points that emerged for us in terms of thinking about safety for automated vehicles and how that can be achieved ethically. And I suppose the most common topic that gets discussed in relation to automated vehicles is trolley problems. So the idea that someone at a junction could determine whether a tram, a trolley car should go left to kill 5 people, or to kill 1 person, or stay on the tracks and kill 5 people, and that kind of decision, carrying that over into automated vehicles. Should a car steer left, potentially killing the driver, or stay driving ahead and kill a dog, a grandmother, a mother in a pushchair? All different kind of combinations of decision have been discussed extensively related to automated vehicles. And I think we were very clear in the group that that wasn't going to be the focus of our discussion, that the topic of ethical automated vehicle behavior was much bigger than trolley problems, and in some ways they're a distraction. That said, there are some important points that trolley problems raise when we think about how automated vehicles behave. So we think about trolley problems as being a very specific moment in time where a decision has to be made. But in automated vehicle operation, it's a continuous process. There are lots of decisions that a vehicle will have made in the run-up to arriving at that decision point, and then actions it can take after that decision that can all be evaluated. So these dilemma situations may well emerge, but we should be looking at all of the decisions that a vehicle's taken, all of the behaviors it's adopted in arriving at that decision point, and then looking at the behaviors and decisions it takes thereafter. We shouldn't just focus on those specific decision points, and we should be evaluating the whether the decisions, those behaviors are ethical in that complete process. And importantly, there needs to be transparency in understanding what the vehicle was perceiving, what behaviors it was taking, what decisions it was making, and being able to review that and say, yes, we think, even though a collision occurred, we think that was an understandable and ethical outcome, and it couldn't be avoided. Or we say, no, that was the wrong thing, that this organization was liable for that collision for these reasons, and we want automated vehicles to behave differently in future to avoid those kind of behaviors, those kind of collisions occurring. So that kind of transparency and ability to see into the vehicle and understand what was going on is absolutely critical. The second point I wanted to talk about was rules. So the extent to which automated vehicles will follow the rules. I think we can all appreciate that human drivers aren't always completely compliant with traffic rules. And sometimes that's in the interests of safety. So how should an automated vehicle determine when it should flex or break a rule in order to maximize safety? Should we think about changing traffic rules to give automated vehicles much clearer guidance about how they should behave? But then you think, well, actually there's infinite variability in the kind of traffic situations we encounter. So is it practical to develop rules that would cover all types of automated vehicle behaviors? Should control be handed back to a human driver? So we've seen some examples of that today already. With the idea of teleoperation, will there be a requirement for an automated vehicle to hand that control back if it senses that it should move out the way, for example, a red traffic light? Should a human driver step in to maneuver that vehicle through a red traffic light to allow an emergency vehicle to come past, for example? But of course, there are challenges in how quickly that process can be achieved and whether the teleoperator has sufficient situation awareness to be able to control that vehicle safely. And then finally, do we allow the automated vehicle not to comply with a rule, but insist that it must be able to offer the reason why it chose to comply and report that, and then again determine, was that the right thing to do? Should we allow that to happen in future? And if not, make sure that operators change the algorithms that are controlling their vehicles to ensure that rule breaking behavior doesn't happen in future. So again, transparency and data being absolutely vital. And then I wanted to talk about metrics. So how we measure the performance of automated vehicles and human drivers actually in terms of road safety. So the first priority we identified, it's the first recommendation, is that the deployment of automated vehicles should reduce harm. It should reduce harm for everyone, and that even if the overall road safety picture was improved, that it would be considered unethical if there was an increase in collisions for a particular category of road users. So, for example, if we introduced automated vehicles and we saw a massive reduction in collisions between motor vehicles, but there was a slight increase in collisions for pedestrians, that would be considered unethical. So we want harm to be reduced globally, but we also want to see no increases in harm for any individual category of road user, whether that's motor vehicles, truck drivers, cyclists, pedestrians, whatever. We also made the recommendation that no other benefits could compensate for an increased risk of physical harm. So people talk about other benefits of automated vehicles. Maybe we could have more efficient traffic flow. Well, great, we all want that to happen. But if we saw an increase in collisions or injuries because of that increase in traffic flow, that would be considered unacceptable. And then we also saw an opportunity to change the way risk is distributed on the roads. So you can imagine a vehicle heading towards another vehicle and a pedestrian, and one formulation could see the vehicle aiming to go down the middle of those two obstacles and distribute risk equally between those two. But if the vehicle can detect what kind of obstacles it's approaching, then maybe it could distribute risk to favor the safety of the more vulnerable road user, the pedestrian in this case. So yeah, I don't think we said a huge amount more than that, but we thought there's an opportunity there to think carefully about how vulnerability is treated by automated vehicles operating on the roads. Okay. And then I've mentioned it a few times already, thinking about data, that we need to be able to aggregate and analyze data streams from automated vehicles, but those need to be accurate. We have lots of different developers developing the way their vehicles operate in different ways at the moment, but there should be a standardized way in which they share data relating to safety so that everyone can learn, everyone can improve, and achieve that kind of ethical outcome by having shared goals, I think, around safety and the ethical operation of automated vehicles. So just a few final slides now. It's almost compulsory for anyone talking about artificial intelligence to have a slide showing Arnie and the Terminator, but this is actually kind of a more positive view, I think, on the way these slides are usually presented. So it was actually nothing I've talked about was inspired by watching the Terminator, I'll say that, but I was showing Terminator 2 to my son, and I saw some scenes in it I thought were actually really relevant to the work I was doing. So one of the early scenes is where the Terminator has come back in time and is looking for things to help him in his mission. And you see data appearing on what is the Terminator's view display, and he's identifying objects in the environment and reports a confidence in how well those match to his mission, his mission task. And I think that seems to me very relevant in how an automated vehicle is behaving. It needs to be able to perceive its environment and have confidence in the items it's identifying. And that's even shown in a scene where you see the view of the Terminator when he is driving. It is driving in this case, and certain data is appearing on the screen as it's driving, and you see kind of it's showing the navigation status, it's showing key driving parameters being tracked, it's showing the operational status of critical systems, and that kind of data should be being made available by automated vehicle developers. I'm not saying they need to share it with everyone, but they maybe need to share it with regulators in order for them to be able to understand if vehicles are being operated safely and give us that confidence that there is ethical control of automated vehicles. And just to note, in about about 1 second of footage, there is a brief clip where it says the vehicle is in FSD mode. And I think anyone who's following Tesla and their full self-driving adventures probably sees the kind of the joke there. So just to conclude, what do we need? I think we need that industry standard on data collection to be able to share and learn from each other, and to be able to see if vehicles are operating in the way that society deems is ethical. That those protocols for data sharing need to be agreed. And there's a real task in determining what we want from our technology and how that would be considered ethical by society. I think there's a danger that if we don't do that, the responsibility for ethics will be left to the technology developers. And myself, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think they want to be in that position. And I think it's a task for society to determine how we want our technology to behave. Couple of final points. I've done some work on this, thinking about how data should be collected and shared from automated vehicles. That's in a report for the British Standards Institution. It's a technique we're calling digital commentary driving. So thinking about how the vehicle is reporting what it's seeing, what it's doing, and how that can be shared. So if you're particularly interested in that topic, do seek out that report. And I was sort of signpost a really insightful report from the US by Erica Groshin and her colleagues, which was looking at the likely employment impacts of automated vehicles and the difference between if we take steps now versus if we take steps later as the technology starts to be deployed. And there's a real difference there in terms of the number of jobs that could be lost. And I think if we take action now, the picture will be much more positive in terms of how the industry will evolve. So for my predictions, it's my view that I don't think anyone currently employed in a commercial driving job will be required to leave their role because of the deployment of automated vehicle technologies. And I think what Željko was saying earlier kind of backs that up. It's a similar kind of position. I think James alluded to this earlier. I think technology will, in fact, make driving jobs potentially more attractive and more lucrative, even though they will change the demands of the role. I think that technology has the potential to improve employment prospects. And there will be some specific use cases that will gradually shift to automated operation over time. Those Starship robots will fulfill a particular role, but I don't think it will cause, kind of wholesale employment loss. People who are currently employed in jobs, I don't think it will cause that big shift of unemployment that some people fear. So I think automation will make driving, will make the movement of goods, the movement of people safer, more efficient, but it can't do everything. And Dimitris alluded to that earlier as well. I think we need to think carefully about how we want to use the technology. This technology is a tool. It's a tool for us to use. It shouldn't be the technology using us. But now really is the time to shape the industry. And I think what Steer to Career is doing, what Hannah's talked about, what James is doing, I think is making a tremendous impact in how we want the industry to evolve in the context of this technology. So I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for your attention. And yeah, fantastic presentation so far. I look forward to the completion of the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Yeah, very interesting. I have scribbled a few observations, but I'm going to save them up until the end. But it's a good point to say, if anyone has any questions for any of the panelists at this stage, do feel free to write into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to them in around about 20 minutes. But for now, I'm going to hand over to the final member of the project team for today, which is Emily from AFT. Emily's going to talk to you about the career pathway, which is IO3, and what we've been doing where that's concerned.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind putting the slide up, James, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Just 1 second.
I'd rather have you deal with it.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll take care of the second part, just the first part, if you don't mind. So while James, perfect. While you're putting up the slides. So my name is Emilie de Miguel. I'm part of the AFC, which is a French association working on training in France. So they're actually the engineering behind all of the training that is done for especially the transport and logistics sector. And right now we are focusing on helping drivers to prepare for the future, which is quite perfect thanks to Nick's presentation. It's the perfect link, so thank you for that. It was actually the third part of the Zero to Career project, and as it was nicely explained by James and Anna and Dimitris, I will go ahead and just present you that slide. I tried to make it short for you. So in order to do that, we set a clear objective, which was to provide an interactive tool for all bus and lorry drivers to discuss about potential career changes ahead of the automation process in the transport and logistics sector. So that was quite a big task. And in order to do that, we had a thought out methodology, that unfolded in 3 main steps. So the first one was actually finding those career pathways, because we are thinking in the future. And so we decided first to be able to find those. We tried to find the actual potential career pathways that are existing. So we use data on all training asked by French drivers, lorry, coach, and even last mile drivers for the past years. We did that for the French drivers because we were lucky enough to have the data around, and it was a bit more difficult to gather it for other countries. So we decided to have their input through templates and try to have that input fit in what we thought thanks to those French drivers training. And then we worked internally with experts in the training fields of the TNL sector, so transport and logistics sector, to figure out whether those career pathways would still be relevant in 20 years and which new careers or new career path would be available. So once we have those potential career pathways in 20 years, well, we kind of have to fill them up. So in order to fill them up, we had to find reliable information for at least the 4 countries involved in the project, but more largely on a European scale. So for that, we used 2 main sources. The first one was the ESCO website, which is the European Skills, Competencies, Qualifications and Occupations website. Thanks to James who gave me that idea. It was a really nice one because they're basically referencing all of the skills, knowledge and competencies that are needed for most of the jobs. They're doing it for jobs that are existing today. The second thing we used is a work document made by France Stratégie, which is an independent cabinet working for the Prime Minister. And they're listing all of the transversal situations that could be used in any jobs. And by transversal situations, they mean both basically soft skills as well as personal skills. So for instance, one of them would be emotional load. So how your job has an impact on the way you manage emotions and how it impacts your own personal space. But there was also other stuff such as, so that looks more like soft skills, such as communicating with others, being able to work in a team, stuff like that. So it was quite broad. And it was then possible for us to compare the future lorry and coach driver jobs to the potential career pathways in the future, and to try and find out whether they would be close on the technical and transversal situation side. So it was a dual comparison. And then it led us to our third step, which was basically thinking ahead. For this last step, I asked the partners to gather information for the jobs. We basically shared the different jobs, because once we have the potential career pathways and how we could compare them, well, we had to think ahead and decide how those jobs would be transformed by automation in a span of 10 to 20 years. So then we compiled the answers, homogenized the results, and then we had a nice scoring of each professional skills and transversal situations. And so once the data was gathered, checked, adjusted, the last job left to do was to present it in the clearest way and most interactive way as possible. So the methodology used to gather data relies in the Excel file you can see on the slide, but I don't believe it's quite interesting to show for everyone. However, I will show you the platform because there was a huge other pillar to think of, which was the interactive tool itself for the drivers. So for this, I was lucky enough to be advised and supported internally, especially by Christophe, who might be here as well now. So hi, Christophe, who helped me design the platform and took care of the whole setup. So if you don't mind, I will try to take control of the screen if I can. And then I'll show you this. Perfect. So can you see my screen? I hope you can. Yeah, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So that is the platform in itself. So it will go under minor changes thanks to stakeholder engagement. So we have a phase in which we try to ask other people what they think of the platform and have the feedback in. So for instance, so the main question is, what would you like to develop in your new career? We chose to have an angle that would ask questions directly to the person concerned. The first minor thing we will change is we will precise in the level for automation or in 2030, 2040, because it doesn't mean that you have to change your career right now. It's just that in order to try to broaden your mind on the possibilities that are available to you, it might be interesting for you to just have an idea of what's possible, so that then you can look further, have other ideas, try to find the right training program, and then eventually change your job. So you have four main, so it's a bit, my screen is a bit small, so I try to make it bigger. So you have four main possibilities: building a relationship, staying at the vehicle, doing IT or administrative support. And let's say you choose building a relationship and you have a whole range of jobs that are available to you. And then depending on your second choice, which is, for instance, moving around or being in contact with young people, you're going to choose the job. So for instance, if you want to build a relationship and be in contact with young people, you can be a driving instructor. So let's say you chose that because it seems that it might be interesting to you. So you basically have, this is called a model window, for which you have a few information. So the name in other languages, because we know that it's a bit difficult for everyone to speak English. So at least they have an idea of what's the job, and if the rest of the information is too difficult for them to gather, they can look it up elsewhere. The type of mobility, whether it's horizontal or vertical, the main idea of the job, then the main tasks of the job. Then for future possible career development, we try to think ahead. And let's say you want to get as a driving instructor, then what are the next steps for you after that, if you still want to involve in your career? So we try to think ahead and give them another opportunity afterwards to build their career in a long way. Then we gave them a few ideas of what is needed. So the EQF levels certification, we wanted to have a very clear idea and give them actual titles of trainings that they could do, but it doesn't really make sense because they might change in 10 to 20 years. So we'd rather stick with something that we're sure of, which is the EQF level, rather than go through too much details. Then a few percentages of the skills that you might or probably should need to master in order to be at ease at that job. And then a few things. So for instance, those are more for the person to try to visualize what would be the work. So the work environment, which would consist of the organizational context. Sometimes, depending on the job, whether in a big or a small company, your job might change drastically because you might do other things, other tasks, or on the contrary, you might be dedicated to a very small part of the job. Business contacts, those are your everyday contacts at work. The pace of work, which is interesting when you want to balance a private and working life. The reporting line, and whether you have to travel or not. Well, at least the how much you have to travel, basically. And so if you want to have even more information, you can click on new tab and you're going to find the same information, but you also find the percentages of compatibility. So that's what I was talking to you about a bit earlier. So based on the ESCO website and the document by France Stratégie, we actually were able to create a compatibility percentage on both transversal work situation and skills, competencies, and knowledge. And we compare them both for a lorry driver or a coach driver, because depending on the initial job, as you can actually see, the percentages are different. So for here, it's just basically a 3% difference in the transversal work situation wise, but it doesn't mean that for other jobs, the difference is not that big. Then you have all of the scoring for transversal work situations. A bit of, so I don't know how it's a word cloud in French, the literal translation, but I don't know if it works in English. Yeah, it works.
Yeah,
okay.
same thing.
Okay, so basically that's a word cloud to try to put something a bit more brighter and not have just lines going on and on and on, and then the rest of the information. So you can close. So for the last part of our mission here was to make it easy to navigate. So of course you have those 4 main enters, and then as you can see, once you click on the driving instructor, it stays lit up. You can still see the little person's face. So you can click on it back again, but at least it gives you a reminder of what you clicked, which means what you thought was interesting at one point or the other. So for instance, vehicle technician as well, you can do it. It's in yellow because we're in the saying in the vehicle. And so this way you can remember what you were interested in. Maybe you can note it down. And if you want to compare jobs, you just click on new tabs, and then you can compare the 2 jobs basically afterwards, or just right now, whatever. So this is basically the platform. And yeah, that is it. And we would be happy to have your feedback as well. We try to make it as clear as possible with bright colors, because we have someone who's colorblind at our company. So he actually told us, well, maybe you should have a bit, have quite different colors and stuff like that. So thank you very much. And that is it for me.
Okay. Thank you very much, Emily. I'm just going to find the presentation and start it again. One point I would make about the pathway that's quite unique, really, in the sense that we try to forget about drivers and focus in on the qualities of a person. So where you've got those categories, it's about what are you good at? What are your basic skills? So the advantage is that we're not just speaking to those that are already within the industry, but actually the pathway applies to those that are looking to cross over from other sectors. So hopefully you think it's on the right path, if you pardon the pun. And thank you very much. So what I'd like to do, and I'm conscious there's just a couple of points that have come in. I've got some scribblings as well, but I wanted just to move on to just some sort of I suppose points that we need to consider for the future. So I've written a few down. We've what should companies do now to make use of drivers tomorrow? And this is really the point that was highlighted by actually within your presentation, Nick. The importance of actually doing something now in what is usually a very reactive industry. Transport and logistics tends to be a bit reactive, not proactive. And there's a bigger picture there. How do we change that mindset? How do we say to people, you really do need to start integrating some of these training requirements, for example, and some of this methodology into training now, because it'll pay dividends in the future. So some of the questions that I've sort of put up here, one of which is addressing basic skills for handling current technology to help the transition. So, we're all very familiar with using tech in our modern lives, but we perhaps haven't thought about how that is connected within our working life and our future working role. So that's perhaps something that we need to consider. We also need to think about providing training in areas that aren't connected to the current tasks. I mean, this is crystal ball stuff, I appreciate. Nobody really knows the bigger picture of the future. But I think we're doing a pretty good job in trying to map it out. But this is the point: is that we need to start providing training that is not about the day-to-day. It's about preparing people for the future. Importantly, very often within a regulatory framework for training, but actually even within in-company training, they tend first to look at the skills to do a task or a job. You know, what does a person do? Rarely, and I may be wrong, but it's just my opinion, but rarely do they think about the social or personal skills being incorporated within a training program. And that's particularly important for things like customer service, because it seems to be, from all our research, that we're heading towards drivers or workers becoming much more based in customer service activities. You know, should we be looking to redeploy instead of hiring fresh? You know, I think that's just a general question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't really actually have an opinion on it, but I think some people will do. And I think it's important to consider redeployment first and then hiring fresh second. Do we involve drivers enough when deciding which vehicles to hire or buy? Now, you may think, why is that relevant for autonomous vehicles? Well, I think if we start to look at the procurement process for transport companies and say, if you involve drivers in not just what they need in the cab, but actually some of the tech that's coming on board, and get them involved in understanding some of the autonomous tech that's already available, you're starting to get their buy-in when it comes to autonomous technology. You're starting to sort of encourage them to understand it and be connected more to it. What about mapping future job roles for horizontal career progression? So this is partly what we're trying to achieve within the career pathway, but the pathway is just one example. You know, there needs to be more of a wide-ranging approach, more of a strategic approach, I guess. What about maintaining regular communication? You know, I think there's a situation where many drivers are out and about, and they may speak to the office once or twice a day, sometimes less. Actually, if it's an autonomous vehicle and they're working on it and it's going a long route, is there a risk that the communication will become less? You know, particularly as the driver may take on some of the roles or responsibilities that are currently done within the office. Staying aware of industry developments to identify new jobs linked to vehicle autonomy, and obviously this is something that Nick touched upon, the fact that there's not going to be a huge situation of redundancies necessarily as this new technology comes in. Naturally, there'll be new jobs created, but how do we then link what's currently done in the current jobs market to the future jobs market or labour market? And finally, I made that point before. You know, I think collectively the industry should use this as an opportunity to start being proactive and finally not reactive, and not just think about, you know, what's happening tomorrow, but what's happening way tomorrow. So those are just a few points that I've made. I think Željko had a question, which I'm going to go to now, somewhere in the chat. Was it in the chat or questions? Oh, the chat has seemed to have disappeared. I don't know why. Željko, are you on audio at all?
Yeah, yes, I am. I can repeat it. And actually, me and Nick have had a little bit of a discussion over the chat as well. No, I thought what Nick was presenting about data sharing and about the ethics, I fully agree to 100% with that. But I'm also looking at the perspective of today, where we still have a lot of less safe drivers on the roads today. And as we all highlighted, current drivers don't follow the speed limits or many of the regulations, so to say. So I was asking Nick, are we putting actually higher ethical requirements and to a certain extent data sharing requirements as well on vehicle automation, then we are putting on human drivers, because right now I don't see that any government or any authority in Europe would accept, take the other way, any vehicle manufacturer would accept to share data with, for example, road authorities that could check the speed limits by the human drivers. So I was just wondering about this element. Are we being more strict with autonomous vehicles than we are today? Nick.
And my answer was
yes, exactly.
Yes and no. So it is definitely my view that we will hold automated vehicles to a higher standard of driving than that for an average driver. I think it will be the expectation that an automated vehicle behaves as well as a safe, competent driver who is adopting best practice driver behaviors. However, we will, for the foreseeable future, we're only going to be thinking about level 4 automated vehicles maximum. So we're thinking about restricted operational design domains. And so the kind of ethical expectations of the automation only apply within the operational design domain. So we don't have to think about kind of a broad, the whole landscape of ethics. We only have to think about how ethics apply to that operational design domain. So it's a simpler task to think about ethics for the operational design domain. That said, I think Željko's point is completely relevant. I think all of the data I've talked about we can collect would be very relevant to understanding the safety of human drivers, and the insurance industry would be very interested in that as well. And there's some very interesting discussions in Germany at the moment about what to do with the Autobahn and the speed limit there. And in the years to come, in the next couple of years, there will be a requirement for vehicles to have intelligent speed adaptation systems fitted as a regulatory requirement. So, yeah, I think what is considered acceptable on the roads and how we understand behaviours and whether those are seen as acceptable is going to change in the years to come. And I think that's a good thing. I think that will only see safety improve.
Yeah. No, good points. And I also made a note to raise the issue of security with autonomous vehicles, because I don't think we've really sort of touched on that much. And I guess Nick, from your involvement within that group, you may have had these discussions. I'm not sure, but when I speak to people about autonomous vehicles, repeatedly you have a situation where they say, "That's great, but if you have a remote control vehicle, where is that there is a risk, an automatic risk that it could be taken over by a criminal, and where are the fail-safes? How risky is it actually, and how likely is that to happen?" But was there any sort of discussion about that within your group?
Yeah, some for sure. I think the sense is, firstly, it's something you can't eliminate. It's a risk you have to live with, but you have to mitigate it as best you can. You have to think about all the potential attack surfaces and make sure risks are mitigated as far as is reasonably practical. But I think it's like anything. It comes down to what is the overall safety performance of the system, and does the presence of automation increase that? And I think we'll get to a stage where that is definitely the case, even allowing for a small non-trivial risk of cyber attack. And but we need the data to be able to prove that. I think there's lots of other situations where we kind of accept cyber risk. For example, I think everyone's kind of happy with digital banking now, even though there is a risk of hacking there. I think we'll need to get to the same position with automated vehicles.
So I guess what you're saying is that the more we get used to this sort of technology, where we sort of walk into a shop and we beep, the more common it will become, and actually it will be less of an issue, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize, these will be very complicated systems with multiple sensors and redundancy and cross correlation between the different sensor systems. So it will be very difficult to comprehensively fool an automated vehicle. At least ones, there are news stories you see where people have put stickers on signs and confused an automated, but yeah, that's because it's a very basic development system. The ones that come to market will need to be much more robust and resilient to those kind of manipulations.
Great. Okay, Željko, you've raised your hand.
Yes, I think this is the first time that I'm using this fantastic functionality in any of the conferences. No, I think, Nick, you're absolutely right. And it's a good question, James. I also see it from the perspective of, well, actually, the autonomous vehicles can actually also, in some aspects, improve security as well. I mean, we have all seen the horrible attacks with the trucks in Berlin, in Stockholm, in Lyon, etc. And if you had, for example, a remote stopping of those trucks that was possible, we would have been able to prevent or mitigate the impact of these attacks, as an example. So again, it feels like we are, yes, there is clearly a risk that criminals could remotely take over the vehicles, but that is the case with the vehicles today as well. So I think in all of these discussions with ethics, with the risks, etc., we always need to look at where are we today, and what are risks compared to today? Because right now there are risks with manually hand-driven trucks and cars, etc. So I don't think that we today need to build systems that are perfect. They will never be perfect, but they need to be better than what we have today. And what do we have today? This is very often kind of forgotten element in these discussions.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just a final point from me, Nick. I did like your reference to the Terminator, not just because it's a good film, but it's a good point you made. And actually, it got me thinking. With augmented reality, and the whole idea of perhaps using it, is it going to be a realistic tool to use within training? And actually, do you think that things like AR will be integrated into the world of work for a driver on a bus, for example?
Yes, I can certainly see it more when automation is there to support the driver. So the argument today is that it could be distracting, or could be it could obscure certain visual cues that a driver needs to operate the vehicle safely. So there's some risk associated with that today, but in future, when there's more support to the driver, then yeah, absolutely. And I think about how a platoon might form, for example. I think having AR to support that task and tell the driver what speed they need to adopt and where they need to position their vehicle, and how to depart from the platoon when that will all be splitting up and they need to go their own separate ways. I think having greater visual information presented on the windscreen to support that would be very beneficial.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we wrap up? No, I don't think so. In which case, it just leaves me to say a huge thank you to Nick, to Željko, and to the project team for today's session. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a really hot topic. For me personally, I would like to see more work done in the area of the labour market and the human factor of vehicle automation. I don't think enough's being done yet, so hopefully it will be. Look out for more information on the project website. This recording will be available there next week, in addition to some of the output that we've produced so far. And if you want to follow the project beyond its end, which is imminent, the website will be available for several years afterwards, so please make use of the resources. But for now, I'd like to thank you all for joining. I hope it's been interesting, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, James. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very
much.
interesting. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.